Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new, then welcome to the channel for the first time. Take a look around, check out some of our videos, and hopefully you'll think about subscribing and giving us a big thumbs up. Today I'm showing you how to make homemade 3 cheese and spinach tortellini. We're going to go through the whole process from making the pasta to the filling to finally rolling it all together. You're going to start with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. What I've done is just dump it onto my counter in a pile and used my hand to make like a little hole in the center. You just want to make sure you have something that has walls built up. If you don't want to get your counter messy, you could also do this on a silicone mat if you have one. Next, we're going to go in with 2 eggs. You're going to crack these right into the center of the well. And to make things easier on myself, I'm going to scramble them one at a time, but you want to make sure that you do scramble these eggs. Don't try to mix them in whole. So I'm just going to whip that up a little bit. You'll see off to my, would be your right hand side, my left hand side, I have a pitcher of water. This is just lukewarm water to add to this pasta dough if it gets too dry as I'm working it. And then to my right hand side, you'll see a pasta machine. You do not need a pasta machine to make this. It just makes things easier if you have one, but you could completely roll this all out by hand. So here I'm mixing in the second egg, and then what you're going to do is start to collapse that well of flour by taking a little bit from the very top edges and mixing it in with that egg. And you're going to continue to whisk that until you have it a thick paste consistency. I can't talk today. And then you're going to just flip the rest of that flour down and start to work it with your hands. So here you'll see me adding a little bit more at a time. I'm going to run and grab a little bit of some pink Himalayan salt. You could use regular table salt, or you could just leave the salt out if you wanted. Either way is fine. I'm just putting a pinch of that in, not very much. And then I'm going to continue mixing in. And this part here is a little bit time consuming. You just want to be very careful that you don't let the sides of that flour wall collapse until that egg has been made into a paste. Otherwise, it's going to run all over your counter and just be a big, huge mess. So I've gotten mine pretty well mixed in now. You can see it's kind of clumping up. Now is where you will go in with your hands and knead the dough the rest of the way. This is going to be a very stiff dough whenever you're first working with it, and it's going to get a little bit dry. You'll want to add some water as you go. So you're just going to squish it with your hands, and then you're going to try to work it into a ball and then fold it over on itself and push down. Here I'm adding about 1 tablespoon of water. And you only want to add a little bit at a time. If you end up adding too much water and your dough gets too wet, you can just sprinkle a little bit more flour down and work it in. It's not going to ruin the dough, so it's pretty flexible that way. It's kind of hard to mess up pasta dough. So here I'm adding another tablespoon of water because I'm not quite to the right consistency that I want. Whenever you're pushing your dough down and kneading it, if it starts to crumble or it's coming apart, it's too dry and you want to add a little bit more water. Also, it's good, I have my measuring cup of flour. You want to keep a little bit extra off to the side because if the dough sticks to your counter, you'll want to sprinkle a little bit more flour down. So it was still a little bit too dry even though it's starting to come together. I'm throwing a little bit more water in there. And you do want to use like room temperature water or a little bit warm water, not cold, because cold will make the dough stiff more so than it already is. So there I'm just picking up the last little bits of flour that I have laid down. And I got my dough a little bit too wet. It was sticking to my counter when I was rolling it, so I'm just picking up a little bit extra flour there. And this part will give you a very good arm workout because this is a pretty stiff dough whenever you're first working it. So you really got to kind of push down with some weight to get that ball of dough kneaded. So what you're going to do now with this finished dough There you'll see me. If you get a bunch of goop stuck onto your hands, pick up a little bit of flour and rub your hands together just like you're washing them. It will take off that egg and dough mixture from your hands to make it a little bit easier to work with things and a little bit less messy in your sink whenever you wash your hands with soap and water. So I'm just going to take this dough and pick up those little pieces that came off. And then you're going to wrap this in some saran wrap or put it in a plastic Ziploc bag. You could cover it with kitchen towel and leave it sit on the counter, or put it in a bowl and cover it. Either way, you don't want to leave this sit out in the air because it will dry out, but you need to let the dough relax for at least 30 minutes. So I'm finishing up kneading that. I wrap mine in saran wrap and just leave it sit out on my counter off to the side, and we're going to move on to our filling for these tortellini now. So jumping on over, I have some fresh spinach leaves that I'm going to chop up. You don't have to use fresh if you buy the frozen chopped spinach. What you'll do is take it out of your freezer, let it thaw, and then take some paper towels and wring it out and try to get as much excess moisture off of it as possible. And then you'll use it the same way as I'm using this fresh. So I'm just going to chop this up, and I used about 2 good handfuls. I would say it comes out to about a cup of the fresh spinach leaves. And it doesn't take a whole lot of filling because these tortellini are going to be made small, so you're only going to use a very small pinch of filling in each one. I ended up making a little bit too much filling for this, but I can throw them into another pasta dish and use it up. Alright, so we have our coarse chop done on that. I have my bowl that I'm going to mix everything in sitting here. We're just going to throw those leaves in there. And for this recipe, you won't see a lot of precise measurements. I'm just kind of eyeballing everything because it really is to your personal taste on the filling with how much of seasonings and the cheeses and everything that you use. Alright, our spinach is in there. I'm going to move this stuff out of the way. It's always good to keep your workspace cleared. So now we're going to go in with the ricotta cheese. And this is just ricotta cheese from Aldi. It's nothing super fancy. And then you'll see me struggle trying to get the plastic covers off. I don't know why they don't put the little tabs like they do on yogurt and things. They never put those on the cheese. And I can never get it open. So we're just going to stab it with the blunt side of a butter knife here to get that plastic broken and take it off. And then I'm just going to take, this is like a big tablespoon. I'm just going to take 2 pretty good sized scoops out of there. Drop that in with my spinach. So that probably is about 1/4 cup of ricotta cheese. And then, of course, I can't make a cooking video without dumping stuff all over my counter. So now we're going to add a little bit of salt. Again, just a pinch. It probably comes out to about maybe 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm throwing a little bit of basil leaves into mine. And you could use fresh herbs also. You don't have to use the dried. On the basil, it probably comes out to about 1/4 teaspoon. It's just a couple of shakes. Then we're going to go in with garlic powder. This one's probably about 1 teaspoon because we like garlic in my house. If you don't like garlic, you could leave that out or substitute it for another seasoning that you like more. Now I'm going to take a nice heaping handful of shredded Parmesan cheese. And an extra little pinch. Again, that is to your personal taste. If you don't like Parmesan, you could swap that out for something else or just leave it out completely. Then I'm going to go in with some shredded mozzarella. And I try to buy the low moisture mozzarella, as you see on the bag, to try to keep it from clumping. But for some reason it doesn't seem to help much. So you'll see it in this giant ball that I have to try to break up. If you buy shredded cheese, I probably would go with the finely shredded. And that way you're not working with these big old chunks of it like I am. So you're going to crumble that, and then of course the next step is going to be mixing all of this together. And you may find once you start mixing, which I did, you'll see here in a few minutes, I ended up having a little more ricotta cheese needing to be added because it got a little dry on me once I threw the rest of the ingredients in. And that's perfectly fine. If you need to add a little more, or if you added too little of something, or if you add too much, just add some more of the rest of the ingredients and then you'll have some extra filling left over. So my filling is mixed. It is sitting off to the side. We're going to start with our dough now. As you can see, whenever I pull it, it's not as stiff. We have some more elasticity to it. Important thing here is while you're working with one little piece of it, keep the rest of it covered in that plastic wrap or inside of your bag to keep that from drying out. So once this is set, it will get a little bit sticky. If you're using a pasta machine, it's very important to keep your dough floured, because if it gets caught in your machine, it is a pain. You have to go through each of those little grooves and teeth and everything in there and get it picked out, and it will shred your dough and just make it really not nice to work with. And then I ended up having to tighten my machine. As you saw it move there, I didn't have it tightened quite enough to my counter. You don't want it to be bobbing around while you're rolling or working with your dough. So between each round of rolling this, you're just going to toss it in a little bit more flour. And what you're going to do is, I'm rolling it through twice on each setting, but you're going to start at your thickest setting and then work your way down, which is a little bit tedious. It takes some time. I didn't roll it to my very thinnest setting. I only rolled my dough out until like the next to last setting. So like not the very thinnest, but the next one up. So here, this is after it has been run through to about the medium setting on my machine, which is about a 5. My machine goes up to, I think, a 9. So then I'm going to cut this, because once it starts getting thinner, it's going to get wider. And when it gets too wide for your machine, you need to trim it down. So I just cut mine in half. So now we're going to go, I was at like a 5. I'm going to drop this down to about a 3. Run this back through again. And if you're doing this by hand, you don't have to worry about the cutting and rolling multiple times. You're just going to really, really work your arms and use your full weight to push down on that dough until you get it rolled out into one giant piece that is as thin as you need it. So there, whenever I lifted this up, what you want to do to check and see if your pasta is the correct width, you should be able to hold it up to a window or to your ceiling lights and be able to see light through it. That's when you know it's the correct width. So mine was. I'm going to roll it that second time through on that setting, and then we are going to start cutting our little squares. They do have little special rollers that have cutters on them that cut a perfect width, and it will make like 3 or 4 little ribbons. I don't have one, so I'm just going to eyeball it and use my pizza cutter. I'm cutting my squares about 1.5 inches wide. And the thing is, you want to make sure that they are a good square shape. They're not like these little oblong pieces on the ends I'm going to take off. They will not be used for this because of how you have to fold these tortellini. You need a square shape for them to line up properly. So that's about how big your squares should be. You're going to take your filling just a very little bit in the center of the tortellini. And I'm making mine kind of big. Traditional tortellini will be even smaller, and it's just a tiny pinch of filling that goes into those. But I like a nice bite of pasta whenever I'm eating, so I'm making mine a little on the larger side. Get some extra water to sit to the side. You're going to need this to wipe the dough in order for it to stick to itself. So you're going to fold one corner to the other to make a little triangle shape, and then pinch as tightly as you can down both sides of that triangle. You want to make sure that there are no holes in the edges of your pasta. Otherwise, whenever you boil this, your filling is going to come running out. So you're going to take the two sides of that triangle, wrap it around your finger, pinch them together in the middle, and then you're going to roll it. And when you roll, you'll roll it in towards that triangle. So that's what it should look like once it's finished. You have like a little point on top, and then it kind of looks like it has its arms crossed in the back, so to speak. So this next one, I'll try to show you up a little bit closer. I know it's kind of hard to follow the first one. So you're going to start with your square with one point facing your palm and one out towards the tips of your fingers. Press those together and then pinch down the sides. Wrap it around your two first fingers on your hand. If you're using the very small ones, you're only going to be able to get it around maybe your index finger. And pinch and roll. And that's what it should look like up a little bit closer. And that is all you have to do. You're going to let these sit out on a flour dusted surface until they are hardened, and then put them in a Ziploc bag, keep them in the freezer, and pull them out and boil them for about 10 minutes whenever you're ready to eat them. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you try this recipe, please let me know how it turned out in the comments down below. Also, let me know if there's any more recipes that you would like to see, and give us a big thumbs up and subscribe.